Physical AI using computer vision specifically is never off. It's always on, it's a sensor, it's looking at the world.
Biometrics, facial recognition. How can we bring all this into an immersive point to where it's useful to the economy, to investors, to builders, to racers, to everyone? Generative models do not have a grasp of real world, cannot hear it in a story. What we do and what we see, we have to prove. Show me the proof.
Taking the experience in a multimodal conversational AI way, using voice, audio clips, using videos, using images that brings that whole thing to life right in front of you.
It's not about labor disappearing. It's about repeatable, mundane tasks disappearing so creativity can get unleashed.
Visionary builder that's building out that multiplex complex, robotics, computer vision. It's not just about the physical experience. You have to connect to the customer. Merge that conversational AI, the immersive experience, and then how do you grow and scale the company to the next level? 30+ years of domain expertise in go-to-market strategy execution. So then I actually started taking a lot of stuff in-house. I was doing my own thumbnail design, figuring out the SEO, the tags, the keywords. Now GEO, generative AI optimization. For those that don't know, you have to write your descriptions a certain way. AIs are looking for the content. We have to do expertise, experience, authority, and trust. Those are the EEAT.
If there's no moat about how special your software is anymore, you got to find a new.
All right, welcome to a special edition of the AI Space podcast. We have a wonderful panel here. First of all, thanks, David, for inviting me to host this panel. What I'm trying to do is curate some builders in AI, following a conversation about what's real, what's practical about their education, etc. Just to give you a quick backdrop, 3 years ago, I saw AI coming down the pike. I said, I gotta get out of this cycle. So I got some AI certifications, launched my AI consulting business, and last year, someone reached out to me on a podcast. I said, why don't I give back? I'm going to invite the other founders, technologists, innovators that are actually building in the space to share their insights, the real playbooks versus the hype, DeepSeek this or Nano Banana this, right? How do you actually really build a business? So I'm going to go for PGL. If you just give like the 2 to 3 minute intro, really focus on what you're building out on 2026. We don't have to go to the past, or really what you're building out of 2026.
All right, so my name is Victor Cherry. I'm the CEO of Longhorn International Motorsports Corporation. We are building a multi-track, I would like to say, ecosystem in North Central Texas for our 2026 goal is to integrate technology as far as AI, biometrics, facial recognition, into how we can incorporate that into our development, going from anywhere from the race cars themselves, drag cars, to sports cars, to soil samples, to soil weight, which is all incorporated into racing. From a track owner perspective, is that it's helped us in a certain way. That's all I can.
So a little bit about me. I have a history in robotics and computer vision, building companies. I own a few companies right now. One portfolio company called Computer Visionaries, where we're basically the fractional skunk works for artificial intelligence for big Fortune 1 through Fortune 1000, plus a bunch of mid-gear companies as well. By building, I hired a CEO to run that. I'm part of that company, but I'm also building 2 new startups in stealth. One is I'm not ready to talk about, but the other one is it's a robotics company, right? So trying to create supply chain robots at a unit economic cost that's like 1/100th the cost of what's out there.
Hi, my name is Steve Deeb. I'm the founder of Homestar Ascent AI. I've got about 25 years or so experience in the automotive space, everything from voice tech to telematics embedded in vehicles to usage-based insurance, fleet telematics. So I've seen a lot in terms of voice tech, big data, machine learning. And I took that experience and I created a really unique product based on multimodal conversational AI, where I generate immersive customer experiences for luxury retail. So that's just a brief overview of me and a little bit about the company. We'll probably get into a little bit more detail as they get into the discussion.
I have 2 microphones while we're doing. Good morning, everybody. My name is Alex Sistos. I'm the SVP of strategy for a company based out of Ireland called Everseen.
are about 3 decades in the retail analytics space. And the focus of what we're building next year is taking this little unknown company that's basically approaching a 9-figure number in annual sales to double down on that core growth, of that. And where we're up is, you're right there. I blew away Delta Airlines database at my first handy job, and that is a consulting. Thanks for bringing that bad memory back.
Yeah, that's great. And your reason is kind of worked out too. David gave me 24 hours to put together a panel. I got my first panel, 3 people in 1 hour, then one backed out. And at the last minute, both y'all replied that y'all would attend. So, oh yeah, yeah. And so I lost 1 bird in the hand and got 2 in the bush. So, so that's the first time that's happened. So, we're going to shift gears a little bit because I think the conversation around education, right? So one of the key things is it's great to have a dream, but if you don't have a strategy and they're able to execute on that and the decision-making skills. So I'm going to start at the end. From an education perspective, what do you think are the critical skills or abilities and decision-making that you think are critical to go for, especially in your role? And one of the things I had these folks here, he's a visionary builder that's building out that motorplex complex, robotics, computer vision. It's not just about the physical experience. You have to connect to the customer. Merge that conversational AI, the immersive experience, and then how do you grow and scale the company to the next level? And those are the important things you have to put together when you're building out a company. So based on that, from your perspective, what are your insights?
From day one being in this career, I started with MS Consulting, then went to Walgreens. Academia has always been my place for source of beautiful minds. And I mean that, from the bottom of my heart. We've designed beer games, etc. Try to bring that reality through the classroom as he was basically talking about it. Failing fast forward and understanding that, I think, is 100% what's the start of education. But it goes both ways. You guys want the retail practical. We want the unbiased. A lot of us on these chairs, outside of this and maybe a lot of over here, are drinking the Kool-Aid. And sometimes you hear the greatest unbiased point of view coming out of school. The fact you're allowing somebody to build something in 15 minutes, as ridiculous as that sounds to me, as a practitioner in the field, I love it because I want to be part of that 2-hour debate you're having. Because right there and then is where I basically pick my next associate, to be honest with you, right? The way they're thinking about problems from different angles.
So I'm going to pick up on what Barb said a few minutes ago. If you look at, high school to college and then college into industry, right? If there's one thing that I think AI could really help with is getting the domain expertise that, a STEM student coming out of college and entering an enterprise would really need. Domain expertise in ontology. So if you think about operating in an insurance company versus operating in a restaurant, let's say, there's things you can learn, right, that you would take with you in your toolkit. But understanding the domain, call it center of excellence around running a restaurant or running a group of restaurants versus, putting together an underwriting policy, at a major insurance carrier, right? AI could really fit into both, but it's really understanding the domains of each one of those verticals and the ontology of how those businesses operate. To me, that's really key. And I appreciate what he was saying earlier. I think that's really the missing piece, right? If to go from being a STEM student to being, let's call it a junior analyst or even a data scientist, right? Those are like key things that you really have to know and understand in order to be successful in the market.
Same thing. When we're hiring people, again, I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record. AI is a tool. It's a tool, right? It's a calculator for all sorts of disciplines. So you need somebody who can think critically. I need critical thinkers. I need creators, people that can dream up things to go do with this. So yes, I need you to understand how to use the tool, but the most important thing I feel like are threefold. It's critical thinking, it's being creative, and staying curious, right? If you can deliver that, you're going to outperform everyone else. I mean, AI is not really creative. It's not truly creative. If I train it on 1,000 cookies, it's not going to magically tell me what a cake is. Right? So just think of it like that. But there's, academia is great. These kids are AI innate.
But I would say critical thinking, first of all, is the one thing that the U.S. has pretty much lost in the ability for our kids to think outside the box. Also, I would add perspective is another thing. Just because there's one perspective doesn't mean that there's another perspective. I can be a driver, but I can also be the owner of a track. And I can bring those two things together through AI as an immersive experience for a spectator or for other companies or to draw technology. But it only happens when we can put into, and I'm just going to just say thank you for that, but also when we can put into our kids that there is no one way to anything in this world. There is no definite way that things has to be done. AI, and I'll just give you briefly, I've been building this company for 3 years in my house. I've been working on this company, working on what to say. AI gave me the ability of inputting my thoughts, the critical thinking. It gave me the ability of when I went to Monaco and went here and went there and saw the good and the bad and the ugly of racing and how can I put it back here. All I did was came back to my house or I was at a cafe and I put it all into one mix and said, this is what I'm thinking. Next thing you know, we start going from there to now we're here physically building. Our investors are loving us because the fact that I could talk about the immersive side. We just had a long meeting today about what we wanted to develop how to attract using AI. And my thing is, once again, biometrics, facial recognition. How can we bring all this into an immersive point to where it's useful to the economy, to investors, to builders, to racers, to everyone? So I would say just real quick, this critical thinking, keep putting that input in there because AI is going to get it wrong. But as long as we keep filling it with prominent data, as long as we keep thinking outside the box, AI will somehow give you a roadmap. That's what I see AI is doing, is building a roadmap to a physical perspective.
In split perspectives, and what I want to get to is your AI playbook or your playbook for building your business in 2020. So I'll give you an example. When I started the podcast, it was a turnkey service. So I was paying someone a good amount of money to produce a podcast. I could say, hey, really good content, but it's not growing that fast. And there's one time where the VA in the Philippines put the description, and I realized she had just used ChatGPT because it says, this episode about traveling in space and all this kind of stuff. But oh no, fake. So I said, you know, I have 30 plus years of domain expertise in go-to-market strategy execution. So then I actually started taking a lot of stuff in-house. I was doing my own thumbnail design, figuring out the SEO, the tags, the keywords. Now GEO, generative AI optimization. For those that don't know, you have to write your descriptions a certain way. It was a death. AIs were looking for the content. We have to do expertise, experience, authority, and trust. Those are the EEAT. Authority and trust. Those are the EEAT type things. And so I've been popping this into the AI, but at the end of the day, AI is not giving complete trailers. With at the end of times, sometimes they add hallucinates, sometimes it lies, and but you have to be the human in the loop and really manage that and build those playbooks. So it's taken. I'm a solopreneur, and it's taking me to a different level, and it's unlocked a different side of me in terms of creativity and capabilities. But if I didn't have that domain expertise and those years and experience, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? But you can ask it to teach you some things. But so how are you using AI in 2026 in terms of building out your business, right?
So right now we're using AI to develop like the buildings. I'm looking at building structure, looking at different technologies, looking at topography, tying it into our LiDAR, which gives us a description of the ground and some of the vegetation and things, so we can identify where there is a floodplain, or our AI has actually helped us identify where there could be flooding, where we need to drain. This all saves money for us. It saves a lot of money, a lot of time when I could go to our engineer, Jacobson and Effner, and say, hey, I see this right here before they even get there and charge me $250, $500 an hour. I could say, this is what we have right here. And it was generated by AI. This is the building that we need right here, all the way down to window structures, soundproofing window structures, so we can build residential. Sound is the biggest thing in my industry that annoys people. They love it, but at the same time, they hate it. And sound is actually one of the things that we're building. So right now, what we're doing is taking AI and we're formulating into this one solid plan that we can walk into at the end of 2026 and say, this is what we're building here. This is what we got. And I'm going to just go off of what you just said. I hate it when AI say thinking. I'm like, if you're thinking and I'm thinking, okay, who's got the answering? And you say, I beat AI, really. And I beat the AI because you still have to study it. So,
Yeah, and we're gonna, I know we kind of brought this up too, and you could talk about your perspective from what you're building. Or while I flip it, based on your perspective, especially from computer vision robotics, what value could we add to what he's building, right?
Oh man,
Talked about it.
let's have a nice 4-hour discovery session.
Yeah.
So like, let me just kind of back up and set a foundation. Alex and I are both like, I would call computer vision in the know. I don't think anybody's an expert in anything right now, changing every week. But if you think about it, generative AI in that category where you have reasoning models and agentic AI, now Clava and all that fun stuff, OpenBlaw, sorry, that is batch, right? It's a beginning and an end, and it's iterative, and you can make changes and all that. Physical AI using computer vision specifically is never off. It's always on. It's a sensor. It's looking at the world. You're programming against that sensor. It's throwing off asynchronous messages to do something about that, right? And it never turns off. So when you're talking about how do you apply something like that, and I'm not even getting into robotics yet, which is much bigger, right? You have to like debug the physical environment and the digital environment in co-development. So Jensen Wong calls it co-development when we're developing a chip and an operating system at the same time, right? So you have to actually design how and where your physical data collection is going to be while you're solving the problems through unique algorithms, pre-processing, inference, post-processing. And what do you do about it all? So that is like very artistic. It's very much like we're trying to really understand the problems really in depth and understand all of the condition requirements to go do that. So it's not something you just say, oh, this is how you're going to go do it. But once you have that experience, yeah, you can design all sorts of fun solutions,
Yeah, and the other thing too is, I mean, he also used it for security, right?
Yeah.
And the way the data is trained, it can have some bias, and you false positives in terms of targeting and sorry.
Oh yeah.
It's the frigging groove. So
Your cases, I mean, who's finishing first? We don't need that's what photo finish is, right? What's the speed? How fast are people changing tires? Is there security threats inside the stadium? Are people in line? How long's the queue? How long are we processing the queue? It's like anything that you want to put a person in front of, just think of it like that, right? And then how do we do these automation routines around that?
And then, now you have that infrastructure in place, Steve. It has to, at the end of the day, still there's humans involved coming into the complex and engaging the website. They're trying to buy tickets, information, and you're dealing with luxury jewelry stores. Then there's an experience. How do you apply some of that to what he's building, right?
So it's anything where the product is the experience, right? Or through the use of the product, right? You generate an experience. So if you hear somebody biting into an apple, that crunch, you don't actually have to see an apple. You think that apple, you have an image of that apple in your head, right? So if you think about the actual experience of using the product, in this case, the actual experience of being, on the track, right? Or, seeing a funny car go through the traps at 200 miles an hour, right? 210 miles an hour, or something like that. The sound, the wind, the heat, right? The exhilaration, like all of those things create an emotional anchor, and the experience of being there and the immersiveness that you can create with that. What if you could take that and use that when people are actually buying the tickets, right? So that's what I mean by taking the experience in a multimodal conversational AI way, using voice, audio clips, using videos, using images that brings that whole thing to life right in front of you. That's the essence of what I'm building.
And then, Alex, I think you come in when, especially on the process side and scaling business, right? And those are things he's thinking about now, because as he try to raise, you're not raising a small amount, $1 billion. There you go. So no one's going to hand that over. No one's going to do that on day one, right? There are tranches and milestones that you hit, and they have to see that path. So from your perspective, from growing and scaling.
How was the first step? Well, I'll start off what you said, right? By experience and training, I'm a process engineer, right? I got thrown into AI about 15 years ago. Was this company out of Germany called Blue Yonder, and a whole bunch of particle physicists that basically created an incredible algorithm to predict uncertainty. A few years later, I met this guy who said, what would you do if I put a good camera over that? And I said, I'd run Blue Yonder out of business. Now that's the original Blue Yonder. The new Blue Yonder is JDA, right? Or what was JDA? What Skip said is incredible, right? That sensor gives you context. You get to contextualize the scene. When computer vision started first, and Skip will tell you this, we used to debate frame AI versus scene AI, right? I'll say it to you a different way. Blink a whole bunch of times while I'm moving my hand and tell me what you saw. And if you saw me dropping my pen, I didn't drop it, I'm not a magician, right? But that's kind of the whole point in terms of like these 30 frames per second of things that we're talking about. We exist to protect people, process, and profitability. And what people forget is that last piece, because without that, we wouldn't be in business. We won't be able to create, right? So, but the standpoint of what we can do for you is exactly that, is point, and we forgot that, right? It's also speak to value. We were talking about this 2 days ago when somebody on stage, poor Wade, I felt for him, right? Because people were saying, well, so you're creating a sentient being, etc., or you were talking about false positives. I had a customer tell me that, so Alex, we could tell me the solution doesn't work 3 out of 10 times. I took him through a store visit. I bit my tongue to all that. And then at the end, when he said, Alex, I get it, I said, allow me to reintroduce myself. I'm the guy who was dying to tell you that 7 is larger than 0. And that we will get to 8, 9, and 10, but it won't be the 8, 9, and 10 that I filled on today, because that's going to keep kind of changing, right? So understanding that physical world from a computer vision, from sensors, from LiDAR, from RFID, I'm not going in retail for the perfect answer. I'm going for an item that Apple would have left the ecosystem unnoticed. We need to figure out in your business, what is that, right? So Skip gave you 100 use cases in that like 30 seconds, but it starts from people's safety first, right? How are they experiencing the experience? And then more importantly, are you running a profitable, there's so many ways to kind of slice there. The most important thing are, what are the most critical business problems we want to solve? And by the way, if we use AI to eliminate the question already, we start with another question instead. Yeah, right? So
it's always a living process. AI is helping us build that whole synergy in one thing, but it's also keeping us conceptual, where right now we have a lot of investors, we have a lot of companies that are looking at us like, how could we fit into AI? And we had a conversation and we talked about robotics, how we could use them as concierge, and the average spectator would even know that we're collecting data. We're collecting this data on how much soda do you drink, how far this for me as a CEO and running this whole platform, running our platform, all that data is collecting us facial recognition and put it in AI. Well, facial recognition tell me this: if I'm looking on this audience and we have our cameras around the complex, and all of a sudden, Emily, you're getting sick. Well, our fire department, our EMS is way on the other side. If we have a data processing center that can capture that right at that moment and say, this person, it's not much as security, but it's so much as this person is getting sick. Now we don't have to wait for a human to get over to them. We can identify the problem, send it over to our medical center, which we will have out there, but also we send that data back, and now we can basically, without going into HIFA and all that, we can basically come back and say, she's having a diabetic experience, or it might be a stroke, this might be something, or they simply drunk.
If it's, sorry, he makes a great point. Skip, you're gonna jump on what I'm gonna say here. It's important to understand what right? Somebody picking up an item and walking away and not buying it is a moment for a report later on.